Hello and welcome back to Symptoms of Stories, where in today's episode we interview Abigail Chow, founder of Red Equity Oklahoma, focusing on menstrual equity as well as reproductive health. Enjoy the episode.
Okay, I am here with Abigail Chow. Hi, Abigail. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, it's so great to meet you, and I'm so glad we were able to make this happen.
Yes.
My name is Abigail Chow, and I'm a junior at the University of Tulsa. I'm a finance major, but also proud Jinx 2023 alum. So I'm super happy to be here and talking with you about menstrual equity. That's something I started with Red Equity Oklahoma my sophomore year in high school, and so I'm super excited to be able to speak about this again because menstrual equity will always have a little piece of my heart.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so the first question is, what first inspired you to start Red Equity Oklahoma, and what gap did you see in your community that motivated your work?
So Red Equity as like a nationwide branch was founded in December 2020 by Samantha Glover and Abby McAdams. And Sam was one of my elementary school best friends growing up. So I started seeing on social media all these like graphics about Red Equity, and then I saw one that said that 1 in 5 students don't have access to menstrual products. And so that was such a shock to me. And I thought about it and I was like, okay, so at Jinx, you're typically in a classroom of like 30 students. Let's say it's split in half and like 50-50 boys and girls. Then like 3 to 6 of my classmates might not have adequate access to menstrual products. So when I thought about just the statistics, I was shocked and I was like, this is not allowed. I can't believe like something so simple as like a menstrual cycle affects so many people in my life. And so I wanted to do something about it, and I reached out to Samantha and was like, hey, I saw like your posts, Red Equity's awesome, like I'd love to get involved. So I started making like infographics and some of their like social media graphics for Red Equity starting around like January 2021. And then July 2021, Sam and Abby asked me to start and found the Oklahoma branch. So that was such an honor and so exciting. And I didn't know what I was getting into, but I was super excited. And so that started my going into my junior year of high school at that point. And so that's kind of how I got involved and how I realized this was an issue that I wanted to address, because even thinking about the statistics in my own community, it was something that I was like, this can't be true and we need to do something about it.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is, for listeners who may not be familiar, how would you define menstrual equity and why is it such a critical public health issue?
I would say menstrual equity is adequate access to affordable and safe menstrual products, as well as education and hygiene facilities. And I would say to the second half of your question in terms of why this is such a critical public health issue. 50% of our population menstruates. And so any gap in access or education or care automatically becomes like a public population level health issue. Mm-hmm. But 2, regardless if you're a menstruator or a non-menstruator, if someone doesn't have access to adequate menstrual products and they may miss school or avoid work or may be forced to manage the bleeding in like an unsafe or undignified way, that affects attendance, productivity, overall well-being, not just for an individual, but for classrooms, workplaces, and entire communities. So it affects you whether or not you're a menstruator or not, and I think it's an issue that still needs to be addressed.
Perfect. Thank you so much. What are some of the biggest challenges people in Tulsa, like I know you mentioned Jinx, so like especially students face when it like comes to accessing menstrual products in education?
Yeah, so I mentioned like when I first started out, I heard about the statistic that 1 in 5 students don't have access to menstrual products. In recent studies, I double checked this. So in 2025, 1 in 4 teens don't have access to menstrual products. And so the statistic has gone up, which is terrible. And then when I did my AP research project, my senior year in high school, I did it around how menstrual inequity affects teens across the Tulsa metro area. So in my research, I found that nearly 1 in 3 students experience menstrual inequity, which is above the national statistics today. And then on top of that, I also wanted to understand like the stigma surrounding menstrual inequity or menstruation. And then just like the amount of education towards menstrual like education.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
My words. And so I also found that like a third of the students I surveyed across all school districts agreed that there's a stigma, and also 2/3 agreed that there's a lack of like information on menstruation in general. So I think in terms of like talking about Tulsa and menstrual equity and menstrual inequity, honestly, I think that we're doing significantly above the national average, which is terrible.
Yeah. So that kind of like ties into that last question, which is like, how do you see menstrual equity connecting to the broader issue of health literacy, like particularly between the North and South Tulsa like gap?
Yeah. I think in my research that I did in high school, across the board, there were students that didn't have access to menstrual products and adequate access to like understanding what a menstrual cycle is. But I think that in Tulsa, there's clear differences between North and South Tulsa in access to healthcare, school resources, a trusted health education. So in places like North Tulsa, where communities have faced long-term underinvestment in healthcare, education, gaps in health literacy can make menstrual and menstruation harder to understand and manage safely. So I think that bridging the gap requires like a culturally relevant education and trusted community-based care, and not just even access to menstrual products. But I think just based on my research, I think we're just on average above the average national statistic, but there are like systemic barriers between North and South in the amount of resources that are given to people who live in those different areas.
Okay, perfect. And what were like some ways that Red Equity Oklahoma was helping to reduce that stigma and like start these conversations about menstruation in like these schools or communities?
I think something I really pride ourselves about for Red Equity Oklahoma was that we consistently hosted a lot of menstrual product drives and assembly days across a lot of high schools. So it wasn't just Jinx, it was Booker T. Washington, it was Bixby High School, Union High School, a few others. And so through all these product drives across different clubs as well, like it was Key Club, NHS, I think some like different shapes and forms of pre-med clubs at different schools. We had such a big mix of students from like across school districts, clubs, menstruators, non-menstruators, that we were able to like educate people on menstruation and destigmatize menstruation through volunteering, which I think is like such a beautiful thing to like do, that like through service people are able to like find that common connection. In our case, whether you're a menstruator or not, you like care for this other person that you're helping by putting together a like period product kit that helps them once a month. And so I think through that just like shared connectivity and activism, we started to break down that stigma, and more people started talking about it outside of just that volunteer event. And more people wanted to like host the drive again. And so I think that was like something I was really proud of that like came out of Red Equity Oklahoma.
That's amazing. So like I know you just did, but like can you show so like a specific story or moment from your work that actually showed this like real impact or what you're doing?
Yeah, I think there's like so many moments. I think one of my like the first thing that comes to mind at least is I think it was either the first or second month that Red Equity Oklahoma was just getting our boots off the ground. And I got an email from someone at the Eastern Food Bank of Oklahoma, which is the largest food bank in Eastern Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, we heard about Red Equity. Are you able to help us? And so to me, I was like, I'm a high school junior trying to get this off the ground. We just had our first assembly. We made I think 121 menstrual products. And we had already distributed them to our current distribution partners. And I was shocked that such a big organization would one, know about us, and two, reach out to us for help. And so I think to me, the fact that such a big organization reached out for help made me realize that this is such a big issue in Tulsa. We ended up forming another distribution partnership that started off really, really small. I think we started off 20 period packages a month in one of their boxes because they have to be in certain types of boxes. And then we ended up helping one of their elementary schools that it didn't fit in their current education budget to help. And so we ended up altering our period packages. So it used to be 10 tampons, 10 pads, and a toxic shock syndrome. But there were these first graders that were starting their periods, which is interesting that nowadays I think there's more and more kids, maybe because of just healthcare in general and also nutrition wise, that are starting their menstrual cycles early. And so we altered those period packages to just have those 10 pads and some liners because we didn't want to freak them out with a tampon as first graders. So I think just that whole entire process of understanding how big of an issue this was, and then altering the kits for this elementary school and working with them, I was able to see it's not just students and people in high school and maybe some young mothers. It's also just everyone who menstruates, whether you're young or old. And so I think just getting that understanding was really impactful to me.
Perfect. Thank you. And that's a great story. It seems so meaningful to you especially. So what misconceptions about menstruation are usually perceived? What do you wish people understood more?
Yeah, I was part of my school newspaper starting my sophomore year. So I wrote an article on, shout out Jinx Surgeon George, but I was writing an article on the stigma even around going to the bathroom. I knew students who either one, weren't allowed to straight up, or two, they would lose points if they used the restroom. And so there's one student that quoted from the article, a male teacher that told them, she told him hey, I need to use the restroom, I need to change out my tampon. And he told her in response, can't you just hold it? And so just the lack of education, even to teachers, that no, you can't just hold your tampon, you can still bleed out, was crazy to find out. And so I think in general, there's just a lack of education between menstruators and non-menstruators of how a menstrual cycle works, how often you need to change your menstrual product, what it requires, what kind of conditions. And I think also overarching, the stigma around menstruation is that it's not normal and it's gross, but it's actually a normal bodily function. And men also go through a cycle, but it just happens daily, and they don't have a menstrual cycle, but it's a hormonal cycle that happens on a daily basis over 24 hours, versus women, it happens over a course of a month basically, and we have 4 phases, but it's still a hormone regulating cycle. And I think most people don't even know men have their own hormone regulating cycle. So I just think on another level, there's just a lack of education on that.
Yeah. No, I feel I've noticed that too. And thank you for saying that. So this is kind of the pink tax. So like it's often cited as a major contributor to period poverty. Can you like explain what that is, and how do you think like pricing and like taxation policies affect menstrual equity, and like what changes you specifically would like to see? Sorry, that's a large question.
Yeah, no, you're so good. And I'm not sure if I have enough like authority to be like, these are the changes I want, but these are the changes that I wish for. So the pink tax is like a higher cost placed on products typically catered to women. And so this includes menstrual products. And in many cases, like the fact that these places are, or these products are still taxed as like they're still taxed as non-essential items. So when something that you need every month costs more and is taxed on top of that, the burden falls hardest on lower income households and students and people managing multiple expenses. So over time, there's like an added cost barrier. And then pricing and taxation policies send a message about what we value as citizens. And so when menstrual products are taxed or priced out of reach, we're effectively saying that managing a basic bodily function isn't a priority. So this directly undermines like menstruation in women and what happens to us as a whole. And so for me, I'd like to see products treated as an essential item and not a luxury item. There's like something called a tampon tax, which is kind of related to the pink tax. And so tampons are taxed by like a sales tax, but things like soap and toilet paper aren't taxed. And so that's kind of essentially treating a menstrual product like a luxury item. So I would like to see like menstrual products exempt from a sales tax and made freely in schools and also public buildings so that they're treated just like toilet paper and soap.
Perfect. And this is the final question, but what advice would you give to like young activists or students who are wanting to make change in their own communities like you did?
Thank you. I think youth voice is one of my favorite things to talk about in sophomore year. I think sophomore year was great. Sophomore year, I got involved with an organization called Tulsa Changemakers, and it's an organization I would encourage any student in Tulsa to join and be a part of. Genuinely, Tulsa Changemakers like changed my life. The first program I went through was their Power of Youth program, and it's just teaching you like why your voice matters as a young adult. I almost said student, but I feel like there's like connotations with even saying the word student, or even like youth. But I would say join organizations like that to learn like and be a part of communities that empower you. Like that's a built-in support system. And they're there to like help you build off of your ideas. I was working on Red Equity like early on at the time. And so they helped me navigate like who are my allies, who are my potential allies, who are people that might not be my allies, but maybe some people that I could convert to allies. And so I think like they were really able to help me think through that process, and also just being able to be part of like a cohort or like assembly of students from across all school districts really exposed me to like so many people. And I got to know like one of my best friends through that program. And then, sorry, there's something in my eye. And then two, I think one of the greatest things I've ever heard, and this was when I was doing an interview for Trojan Torch for my school newspaper. And I was asking someone who's part of this organization called Center for Public Secrets. And their whole organization is about exposing like the secrets of like Tulsa, or like hidden stories that have some sort of stigma around them. And so in the process of interviewing this guy, I asked him like what advice he had for me. So he said, well, in Tulsa, you have to be the change you want to see. So like he encouraged me to do that. And I think that's a phrase that has stuck with me ever since then. I think it's really important as Tulsans to like like we see what's going on here. Like you can't like not see what's going on here in terms of like education, especially. And so I think it's important to be the change you want to see and make a difference now. I think there's no small action, and the importance is to start now and start these conversations. And I think one of the most fun things about it is starting these conversations, because you get to know like, oh, I'm not the only one, and oh, there's other people that want to join forces. And I think something really special about Tulsa is it's a very collaborative city. So I think that like it's very possible, and it's very important to be able to start things now. And like, I don't think youth voice is heard enough, but the power of that is that it's another perspective that a lot of people haven't heard. So like your voice is important because you share a perspective that none of these adults have. And so I think it's really important to like understand that and like find pride in that and like strive to make a change through that. So anyways, I don't know if any of that was helpful, but one, be the change you want to see, and two, like join organizations like Tulsa Changemakers. I think they really do a great job of really empowering youth who want to make a change and cultivating that kind of community.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the interview.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Symptoms to Stories. Huge thanks again to Abigail Chow, founder of Red Equity Oklahoma, for reminding us that menstrual equity and reproductive health are public health and deserve public solutions. When we put the public back into public health, real change becomes possible. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep turning symptoms into stories.